Let's get, as he's been talking to us here recently about dreaming, having big dreams and dreaming with him, understanding that that our purpose is only found in him. And that when we connect to that, to only desiring a purpose that is from him, by him, that it brings success with it. It brings prosperity with it, that all of these things are things that are added to us. And so, as we get started today, this is just another aspect of what God, I think, wants us to know, some things that we need to have, be aware of in our journey. Kind of stuff to put in your backpack as you go along to make sure you remember and remind yourself. I see him bringing back ideas, things that we have talked about in the past, but not from, remember, I've told you that God does not waste his breath, nor does he waste ours. And so he's never going to tell us something that we've heard before just to be repeating something. What I realize is in this time forward, the things that God has talked to us about in the past, he was doing it in a manner of teaching us some things, introducing ideas and concepts to us. But what we see now as he brings some of these back is that now it's time for you to operate in that. It's time for you to be sure that you are utilizing that concept. And so I think that's one thing that we have to be aware of as we hear repeated concepts, that you would understand he's now asking you, make sure you are operating in this. Okay. Make sure that you are pulling on this. This is not just, it's not just something I'm trying to teach you today. I'm trying to show you how to operate, because we are in the new thing, building in the new way. And God is saying, here's all the tools I've already equipped you with. And now here's how we're going to use them. And so this morning, as he and I were talking, he said just a phrase to me, and I asked him, of course, what does he want to bring out today? And he just gave me a phrase again, and he said, nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted. And so we're going to go to a familiar passage today, but there's actually several things we'll be pulling out of this. We're not going to finish that all today, but one of the first things he wants to reiterate is that principle that nothing is wasted. And so I'm going to show you that here, and then we're going to talk about how does that apply, and making sure that we practically apply that, because that principle right there, if we don't grasp it, it has a lot to do with discouragement creeping in, with frustration creeping in. Okay. And when those things creep in, then that is a stronghold. That's a foothold that the enemy has to derail us and to delay us. Okay. Derail and delay. And so we're not going to fall for the enemy's tactics anymore. We know how to combat them. So let's look at John 6, 2 through 14, and I'm in the Passion Translation. John 6, 2 through 14. And like I said, this is this passage, there's a lot in it, and we're going to be talking about several different principles here. But the first thing right now is what God mentioned about things being wasted. So John 6, 2 and 14 in the Passion, it says, and a massive crowd of people followed him everywhere. This talking about Jesus here. It says they were attracted by his miracles and the healings they watched him perform. Jesus went up the slope of a hill and sat down with his disciples. Now it was approaching the time of the Jewish celebration of Passover, and there were many pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem in the crowd. As Jesus sat down, he looked out and saw the massive crowd of people scrambling up the hill, for they wanted to be near him. So he turned to Philip and said, where will we buy enough food to feed all these people? Now Jesus already knew what he was about to do, but he said this to stretch Philip's faith. Philip answered, well, I suppose if we were to give everyone only a snack, it would cost thousands of dollars to buy enough food. But just then, Andrew, Peter's brother, spoke up and said, look, here's a young person with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far would that go with this huge crowd? Now, I want you, I know this, again, this passage is familiar, but I just want to stop for a moment and make sure you're painting the picture of what's being seen here. Jesus has been performing miracles, and now there's these crowds of people that are following him everywhere. And it says it was about time for Passover. So these people have been traveling already. They are, they're in the middle of their journey, and you've got thousands of people here. And they're obviously it's about that time. It's about for them to have some food. And so as the disciples have been, walking along with Jesus and seeing these miracles be performed, we've talked about this passage before, in which we often find ourselves coming up to situations where it is time that he stretch our faith, y'all. It's time that he stretch our faith. And so faith never stops growing. And so just because you have been down one road once before doesn't mean that there's not further to go. Just because you've been in a situation, if there is a situation particularly that is familiar in your life, like it's almost like it's a cycle that keeps coming, this is an opportunity to stretch your faith, to keep stepping forward and handle that situation differently. And so Jesus is kind of peering over and pushing Philip in this instance. And he's really, by pushing Philip, he's pushing everybody. And he's saying, hey, what do you think we should do? What do you see as a possibility in this situation? And therein lies a lot of our problem. We close our brain to the possibility. We close our brain to the possibility because of the way we're used to working, the way we're used to seeing things. And so Philip, even after having been around all of this, Jesus, for this time, he still reverts back to the parameters that he's used to. Okay? That he's used to having to exchange money for food. He's used to having to calculate the cost and seeing, is there enough? Is there enough? That's the system he's operated in. And he comes right back to it. Force of habit. It's kind of how we operate. We come up to a situation. And so Jesus is saying, push beyond that. Push beyond what you're used to seeing and doing. Let me stretch your faith here. Okay, and it says, and Andrew, he catches a glimpse of the possibility. He catches a glimpse of the kingdom when he says, well, there is this kid, and he's got some fish and he's got some bread, and I don't know what you can do with that. I don't really know how far that's going to go, he says, but he's peering into. And his walls are beginning to fall because he began to see possibility. And see, these indicate these two ways in which we can approach every situation in our life. When we can, and goes right back to what God, when talking about expanding our dream and helping us to understand our eternal value here on earth, that what you're going to do, the way in which you're going to operate, is not just going to be from an earthly realm, but you are to operate from the heavenly to the earth. That's your position here. And so we must see the possibility first. No matter what everything else looks like, we must see first, this is possible. That's the first thing. Every time you come up upon a stumbling block, every time some deviation looks like it's going on, I want the first thing to be, this is possible. This is possible. This is possible. Whatever dream God is starting to reveal to you right now, that's your first thought. This is possible. Because that's the first thing he wants you to see. That's the only thing he was asking Philip is this possible? When he asked how we're going to do it, he's just asking, can you believe this is possible? And therein is how he stretches our faith. Faith, first look and see it's possible. Okay. And so we go here, and Andrew, he looks around and he's like, how far is this going to go? And then Jesus says, have everyone sit down. Jesus said to his disciples, so on the vast grassy slope, more than 5,000 hungry people sat down. I want you to think about what God is asking to see a possibility in. No food, nowhere to buy food for miles, not even enough cash on you to buy food. They didn't have debit cards back then. Okay. And you've got 5,000. How many of y'all, listen, I have 3 boys, and at various times I've got my male nephews. How many of y'all know it's difficult to feed 3 boys? Okay. Much less 5,000 people. Okay. This is the situation. Now, so I'm telling you here, there is no situation in which God sees impossible. Okay. So maybe it has been Philip's experience up until this point. We don't know if they had kids or what kind of families they were trying to feed or any of that. We don't know. Maybe he had trouble in the past trying to feed his family sometime. You see what I'm saying? Our circumstances dictate how we think. So often our past experience dictates how we think, how we see the next situation. And God is saying, forget all of that. Forget what experience has taught you so far, because remember, a lot of times that's the devil, that's the enemy teaching you how to stay in your place. That's the enemy teaching you how to stay in your place, how to stay on the natural level instead of delving into his realm, even, which is supernatural, which is spiritual, you see? And so he's saying, take a look. Let's see, it's 5,000 people here. You can't even put your eyeballs on 5,000 people. So there's more people than you can even see from where you're standing. And then Jesus said, it says, Jesus then took the barley loaves and the fish and gave thanks to God. So here's what he does. He switches his thought process. He's demonstrating a switch of a process here. Rather than seeing to believe, he believes to see. You see, he switched it up on him. He said, rather than you looking at what the natural is, let's first go up and see what's in the heavenlies. He turns and gives thanks to God. He says, let's take this out of the natural realm and put it in the supernatural realm first. And that's the question. Do we do that? Do we put it in the hands of the supernatural first? Or is our first inclination always, what can I do? How do I map this out? How do I make this happen? And then again, like we talked about the last couple of weeks, and then Lord bless it. He says, let's reverse it. Let's think supernatural first. Okay. He took the barley loaves, he gave thanks. It says, then he gave it to the disciples to distribute to the people. Miraculously, the food multiplied with everyone eating as much as they wanted. You see, this is an indication of what's going on in the heavenlies, in the spiritual realm. He's like, if you tap into that, everybody gets what they want. Everybody gets their fill. There's no lack. There's no impossibility. And it says, when everyone was satisfied, Jesus told his disciples, now go back and gather up the pieces left over so that nothing will be wasted. Okay. And it says the disciples filled up 12 baskets of fragments, a basket of leftovers for each disciple. All the people were astounded as they saw with their own eyes the incredible miracle Jesus had performed. They began to say among themselves, he really is the one, the true prophet we've been expecting. You see, this example here of nothing wasted, Jesus is going back for a couple reasons. He's telling them, go pick up what's left over, because you need to know that this is one of the ways in which you recognize me, is that there's overflow. And each one of you are going to put your hands on this overflow, because I need each one of you to be a part of this flipping the switch of thinking barely enough to more than enough. You see, he had them each be active in that. 12 whole baskets were left over after we barely had a couple of fish and one piece of bread. Okay. And he says, you're going to participate. I need you to see the physical manifestation of what's already in heaven. But this principle here that nothing is wasted. See, Jesus, he's concerned with even those little things. He's concerned that they didn't, was it to make sure they didn't leave a mess behind? I don't know. Who knows? Maybe Jesus is always multitasking. Okay. So in one lesson, he's teaching 15 others. Don't litter. Okay. Maybe that was one of them. Okay. But the bottom line was here that he said, I have a principle. There's a principle at work that nothing is wasted. And so this is one of those principles that we need to take along with us as we go through our journey, as we come back to him in picking up the hammer and putting the nails to, putting our hands to what he asked you to build. Because so often we can be like Philip and utilize our past experience and try to bring that forward into mapping out what happens next. But see, God, and a lot of times that comes from the things that the enemy has tried to teach us. And so maybe in the past there have been things that he's going to ask you to do again. Like when he told Peter to go cast his net again, he's making the same effort. He's doing the same thing, but this time it's going to be at his word and it's going to be different. You see, and so, but all the times before that Peter was fishing, nothing was wasted. God is saying there's no experience in your life. There's nothing that you have been through. There is no stumble. There is no fail. Maybe you lost somebody. Maybe you lost a client. Maybe a relationship was distorted or broken. Maybe whatever happened, maybe you felt like you failed in this thing or that thing, but he's reminding you that there is a principle at work in which nothing is wasted. And so now when I can go back, this is part of healing so that you be whole, is that you can look back at those same situations and now pull the lesson from them because nothing is wasted. Now I get to go look back and I get to see how I developed strength through that, or how I developed wisdom through that, how my capacity expanded for what I could hold. See, the whole time Jesus has been mapping out to get you to your victory the whole time. The whole time. And so just as he walked into this situation, he already knew what he was going to do. It says he already knew the lessons that were going to be taught. So what does that mean? That means everything that even every person who attended that particular event, everything they had ever gone through was leading up to this moment right here to watch this particular miracle happen, to be a part of this particular thing. So what we have to do as we move forward, when God is expanding you, you have to be able to look back at your experience and know that nothing was wasted, because otherwise the enemy will make you stay small and stay in your place because he wants you to think there's a stumbling block that's just going to cause delay and it's going to waste your time. There's a stumbling block that's just going to detour you, and it's not worth it to dream that big again. Because don't you remember when it's not worth it for you to think you're worthy of the purpose that God even is trying to lay on your heart? It's too big for you, because don't you remember back when this happened, and don't you remember when that happened, and don't you remember when you lost that person? Don't you remember when you stumbled over that thing? Don't you remember that? See, the nothing is wasted is a principle that fights back and pushes back the enemy, because it reminds him that God is still in control and is going to get me where I'm going. That nothing is wasted is key for you to remember and speak back to the enemy when he wants to tell you there are reasons for you not to go forward in the new thing, that there are reasons for you to not dream so big, because remember when. But Jesus demonstrates for us here, it's a bigger principle. I don't even want the breadcrumbs left over, because there is nothing that will be wasted in your life. There is nothing that will be wasted in your life. And God finds you so precious to him that he will not allow one breath, just one breath of yours to be wasted. He won't speak to you something that is idle. Everything, everything was already mapped out for you and your victory. And so this is something I want you to make sure you got in your backpack as we continue forward, as we journey forward and build. You can let go of every disappointment. You can let go of every heartbreak. And that doesn't mean it mean it didn't happen. But what it means is it won't be wasted. It won't be wasted. And so there's nothing that can happen along your journey that is going to be for nothing. And if I can trust God in that, then I can keep walking. And what that means is my focus is only on growth. Because I know that whatever it looked like, if it looked different than what I expected, great. This is an opportunity for me to expand. This is an opportunity for me to grow. This is an opportunity because nothing in my life is ever wasted. And that's because God values me. That's because he values me. And so when I can come back to the enemy with that, he can't derail you. He can't delay you. Those things don't even exist. Those words don't exist because nothing's wasted, right? So, amen. We're going to stop right there for today.